A cowboy's dog found a woman dying in the dust and discovered she was his fiancée. The sun had been climbing in the sky for hours, burning the dry earth beneath Jack's boots. He adjusted the brim of his weathered hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The wind carried little relief, just more dust that coated his face and stung his eyes. Jack's horse, a strong brown stallion named Rusty, moved steadily along the narrow trail, its hooves kicking up small clouds of powdery dirt. Beside him, Duke, his loyal German Shepherd mix, ran a few steps ahead, ears perked and tail stiff. Duke was alert, always alert, and Jack trusted the dog's instincts more than anything else in the world. Jack's mind wandered to the letter he had received only a week ago. It had been from Emily, the woman who had stolen his heart months earlier. She was not just his fiancée. She was the reason he smiled even in the hardest days, the reason he woke up each morning with purpose. But now, as he rode through the endless stretch of desert, that smile seemed far away. Emily had set out on her own journey to deliver supplies to a distant settlement, a dangerous trek through land where few people dared to travel alone. He had tried to argue, tried to insist she wait for him, but Emily had been firm. She was strong and independent, she had said, and she promised she would be careful. Jack trusted her words, but the desert was unforgiving. The more he thought about it, the tighter his chest felt. What if something had happened to her? What if she had fallen, gotten sick, or worse? He shook his head and whispered under his breath, "I hope you're all right, Emily." Duke's sudden bark cut through the still air. Jack's horse flinched, and the sound made him snap out of his thoughts. He squinted ahead, trying to see what had caught Duke's attention. There, just a few dozen yards away, the dog had stopped, growling low in his throat. His eyes were fixed on something in the dust. Jack urged Rusty forward, heart beating faster. As he got closer, he saw the outline of a figure lying motionless on the ground. At first, he thought it might be a traveler who had collapsed under the heat. But as he dismounted and ran the last few steps, he saw the soft, sun-bleached hair and the thin frame of a young woman. She was covered in dust and dirt, her clothes torn at the edges, and she barely moved. Panic shot through Jack's chest. "Emily," he called, dropping to his knees beside her. The sound of her name made Duke bark again, circling protectively around them. Jack shook her gently, afraid but trying not to hurt her fragile body. "Emily, it's me, Jack. Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, but she did not fully open her eyes. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin felt hot and dry to the touch. Jack's heart pounded. He tore a small cloth from his shirt and tried to wipe the sweat and dirt from her face. "Hold on, Emily. Don't give up. I've got you," he murmured. He looked at Duke, who was growling softly, sensing Jack's fear. The dog nudged Emily's shoulder with his nose, as if to reassure both of them that she was not alone. Jack quickly scanned the area. The desert was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the distant hum of wind and the soft sound of Rusty pawing at the ground. There was no shelter nearby, no water, nothing but the blazing sun and endless dry earth. Jack knew he had to act fast. He remembered a small creek he had passed a few miles back. It would be a difficult journey, but he had to get her there before it was too late. He lifted Emily carefully into his arms, feeling the weight of her weakness. She was lighter than he expected, but her frail body made the task even harder. Duke ran alongside, keeping a sharp eye out for any danger. Jack's muscles ached as he walked toward the path that led to the creek, each step a struggle under the scorching sun. As he moved, memories of Emily flooded his mind. He remembered the first time he had met her in the small town where he had grown up. She had been standing by the market, laughing at a joke someone had made. Her eyes had sparkled, and the warmth of her smile had stayed with him ever since. He remembered their long walks along the riverbank, holding hands and dreaming about a life together. And he remembered the proposal, simple but heartfelt, with Duke barking excitedly at their feet as Jack slipped the ring onto her finger. The thought of losing her now made his chest tighten even more. He whispered to himself, "I won't let anything happen to you, Emily. Not here, not now." The journey to the creek was exhausting. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the dry air made every breath a challenge. Jack's shirt clung to his back, soaked with sweat, and his legs burned with fatigue. But Duke never left Emily's side. The dog nudged her gently every few steps, barking softly whenever she stirred, as if urging her to stay with them. At one point, Emily moaned softly, and Jack froze. "It's okay, Emily," he said, holding her closer. "You're safe with me. Just hold on a little longer." He could feel the life slowly returning to her, each shallow breath a small victory. He whispered words of encouragement, telling her stories of the town they would reach, of the home they would build together, of the future they would share. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of heat, dust, and determination. Jack felt his strength waning, but he refused to stop. Every time his legs ached, he looked down at Emily's pale face and found the will to keep going. Duke never tired, never faltered, running just ahead, then circling back to check on Emily. It was as if the dog knew exactly what was at stake. Finally, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Jack spotted the faint glimmer of water. Relief surged through him. The creek was small, but it would be enough to give Emily the hydration and rest she desperately needed. He lowered her gently to the ground and knelt beside her. The cool water from the creek's edge was a balm to her parched lips. Jack wet a cloth and dabbed her face, feeling a small but encouraging rise in her color. Duke sat proudly beside them, his tail wagging slowly. He sniffed Emily's hand and pressed his head against her arm, as if to tell her that everything would be okay. Jack smiled faintly, exhausted but relieved. "Good boy, Duke," he whispered, ruffling the dog's ears. "You found her and brought her back to me." Emily's eyes slowly opened, revealing a flicker of recognition. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Jack felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "Yes, it's me," he said softly. "You're safe now. I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you." She tried to speak again, but her strength was too weak. Jack held her hand tightly, murmuring words of comfort. Duke nuzzled her gently, his warm presence a reassurance that they were not alone in the vast, harsh desert. Jack realized in that moment how much he relied not only on his own skills, but on the bond he shared with Duke. The dog had been more than a companion. He had been a guide, a protector, and now a lifesaver. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Jack knew the night would bring cold temperatures, and he quickly gathered some dry brush and started a small, controlled fire near the creek. He wrapped Emily in a spare blanket he carried, shielding her from the chill. He kept talking to her, sharing stories, reminding her of the life they would build together, and recounting moments that made them both laugh in happier times. Duke lay close to Emily, keeping her warm and alert. Jack watched the fire flicker in her eyes, and for the first time since finding her, he felt a glimmer of hope. Emily was alive. She was still his Emily. And together, with Duke's unwavering loyalty, they would face whatever challenges the desert might throw at them next. Jack leaned back against a rock, exhausted but watchful, and whispered once more, "We'll make it, Emily. I promise. We'll make it." Duke rested his head on her lap, and for the first time that day, the small group felt a quiet peace settle over them in the midst of the endless, dusty wilderness. Jack stayed beside Emily as the shadows of the evening grew long and the desert temperature began to drop. The heat of the day had faded, but the chill in the air made him shiver under his worn jacket. He looked down at Emily, her chest rising and falling slowly, each breath a fragile promise of life. Duke lay close to her, keeping a constant watch, ears twitching at every sound in the quiet desert. Jack felt a mixture of relief and worry. She was alive, yes, but weak and in danger. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, the night could become even more dangerous. Carefully, Jack arranged some of the small branches and dry brush he had gathered into a gentle circle and sparked a small fire. The flames licked the air, throwing warm light across their little makeshift camp. Emily's eyes were half closed, but when they caught the firelight, they seemed to flicker with recognition. Jack smiled softly, though his heart still raced. "It's okay, Emily," he whispered. "I'm right here. You're safe now." Duke's nose nudged Emily's arm, and she stirred slightly. Her lips moved as if she were trying to speak, but no words came. Jack pressed her hand gently. "Don't worry about talking yet. Just focus on resting. We'll get you through this." He felt a surge of gratitude for Duke, whose sharp instincts had found her when Jack might never have noticed. The dog's loyalty and intelligence were remarkable, and Jack knew Emily's life had been saved because of him. The night deepened, and the sounds of the desert became louder. Crickets chirped, and the wind whispered across the dunes. Jack could see the stars beginning to appear, twinkling in the dark sky. They reminded him of nights he had spent with Emily before she left on her journey, sitting under the open sky and dreaming about a life together. He let himself remember those happy moments. He remembered her laugh, light and clear, echoing across the hills. He remembered the gentle touch of her hand in his. These memories gave him strength, reminding him why he could not let anything happen to her now. Jack gently pulled a canteen from a saddlebag and wet a cloth with water. He dabbed her lips and throat, careful not to startle her. She tried to lift her head, and he supported it. "Drink slowly," he instructed softly. Emily managed a tiny sip, and Jack felt relief wash over him. She was responding, even if only a little. Duke wagged his tail, sensing the small victory, and rested his head on her lap again. Jack reached for some of the small food rations he carried, soft biscuits that would be easier for her to eat. Emily managed to nibble a little, and he encouraged her with soft words. "That's good, Emily. You're doing great." As she rested, Jack kept talking to her. He knew that sometimes words could be more powerful than medicine. He told her stories of their past, funny moments, small adventures, and memories of love and laughter. Emily's eyes flickered open wider, and she gave a faint smile. For a moment, Jack's heart swelled with hope. She was still here, still fighting, but Jack could see that her body was still fragile. Her arms were thin, her skin pale, and her breathing shallow. He could not let her stay in the desert overnight. He needed to move her to safety, to a place where she could rest properly, drink water, and recover. Jack thought about the nearest settlement, a small town several miles away. The journey would be difficult, but he had no choice. Emily depended on him, and he would not let her down. Carefully, Jack lifted her once more. This time he sat her across Rusty, the horse he had ridden earlier, strapping her gently so she would not fall. Duke ran ahead, circling and barking softly to warn them of any danger. Jack mounted Rusty behind Emily, holding her carefully as they started toward the distant town. Every step was slow and careful. The terrain was uneven, and Jack had to balance both his weight and hers, making sure the horse didn't stumble. As they moved, Jack noticed the sun had disappeared behind the mountains, and darkness began to settle. The desert night was cold, and the wind carried a sharper chill. He pulled his jacket around Emily as best he could. "Hold on, Emily," he murmured. "We're almost there. You're going to be okay." Duke never left their side. He ran ahead, then doubled back, checking on Emily, his loyalty unwavering. Jack marveled at the dog's instincts. He knew Duke sensed Emily's weakness, knew when she needed comfort or protection. At one point, a coyote howled in the distance, and Duke growled low in his throat, warning the creature to stay away. Jack felt a surge of gratitude. With Duke, Emily had a protector even he could not replace. The journey was slow, but Jack refused to give up. He thought of Emily's strength, how she had insisted on traveling alone, how she had faced danger without fear. That same strength had brought her this far, and he admired her even more for it. He whispered encouragements to her as they moved. "You're brave, Emily. I'm proud of you." "Just a little farther." She responded with a faint squeeze of his hand, and it was enough to keep him going. Hours passed. The night grew darker, but the stars provided a faint light. Jack guided Rusty carefully along the rocky path. His arms ached, his legs trembled from holding Emily steady, but he refused to stop. Every step was a promise he had made, a vow to protect her no matter what. Emily's eyes fluttered open occasionally, and she murmured words that Jack could barely hear. He repeated them back gently, letting her know he was listening. "I'm right here, Emily. You're not alone." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack spotted the first signs of life. A faint glow in the distance, lights from the small town where they would find help. Relief surged through him, and he urged Rusty forward carefully. Emily's head rested against his chest, and he whispered softly, "We're almost there. Just a little more." Duke ran ahead, barking once, as if to signal that they were nearing safety. When they reached the edge of the town, the streets were quiet, but Jack could see a small clinic with light spilling from the windows. He guided Rusty toward it, and a local resident, alerted by Duke's barking, came running out. "Help, please, my fiancée. She needs a doctor," Jack called, his voice urgent. The man quickly grabbed a stretcher, and Jack carefully lifted Emily onto it. Duke stayed close, growling softly to ensure no one came too near. Inside the clinic, Jack set Emily down gently, his hands trembling with exhaustion and relief. The doctor immediately began attending to her, checking her pulse and giving her water. Jack stood back, holding Duke's collar, and watched as Emily's color began to return. Slowly, the tension in Jack's chest eased. She was alive. She was going to be okay. Emily opened her eyes fully, and the first thing she saw was Jack's worn but determined face, and Duke sitting loyally beside her. A tear slipped from her eye as she whispered, "Jack." He leaned down and held her hand, whispering back, "I've got you. You're safe now. That's all that matters." Duke nudged her hand gently, and Emily smiled faintly, finding comfort in the presence of both her fiancé and the dog who had saved her. Jack's heart swelled with gratitude. He knew he owed Duke more than he could ever repay. The dog's instincts, loyalty, and bravery had been crucial in keeping Emily alive. Without him, Jack might never have found her in time. Duke had been more than a companion. He had been a hero. The night in the clinic passed quietly. Emily rested, while Jack sat beside her, holding her hand and stroking Duke's fur. The events of the day weighed heavily on all of them, but the relief of safety was overwhelming. Jack whispered stories softly to Emily, recounting memories of their life together and reminding her of the future they would build. Duke rested his head on Emily's lap, warm and steady, a silent guardian ensuring she was never alone. As dawn approached, Jack finally allowed himself to breathe fully. Emily was stable, the danger behind them for now, and the bond between them had grown even stronger through the trial they had endured. Jack knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had survived one of the hardest nights together, and nothing could break the connection forged in the desert. Jack leaned back in his chair, exhausted but grateful, and whispered softly, "We made it, Emily. We're going to be okay." Duke lifted his head, giving a small bark, as if agreeing. And for the first time since that desperate day began, Jack allowed himself to feel hope. A hope that was rooted in love, loyalty, and the courage of a dog who had never let them down. The first light of dawn began to seep through the clinic windows, casting a soft glow across the small room. Jack sat beside Emily, holding her hand gently, watching her chest rise and fall with each slow, steady breath. She was still weak, but the color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes, though tired, sparkled faintly when they met his. Duke lay at her feet, alert as ever, ears twitching at every sound. Jack couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude toward the dog. Duke had found her in the desert and had never left her side. Without him, Emily might never have made it this far. The doctor, a kind-faced man with tired eyes, had insisted that Emily stay in the clinic for a few hours to regain her strength before they attempted to move her. Jack had nodded, understanding that rushing could be dangerous, but he also knew that their journey was far from over. They were still miles from their home, and Emily's recovery would be easier if she were safe in familiar surroundings. By mid-morning, Emily had gained enough strength to sit up with Jack's support. He helped her into a blanket and lifted her carefully onto Rusty, the horse. Duke ran alongside, occasionally looking up at Jack to check that he was steady. Jack whispered to Emily, "We're going to move slowly, but we'll get there." "I promise." She nodded weakly, her trust in him unwavering, and gave a faint smile that gave Jack the determination to keep going. The journey was more difficult than Jack had expected. The trail leading out of the town was rocky and uneven. Rusty's hooves slipped occasionally on loose stones, and Jack had to adjust his balance constantly to keep Emily from falling. Every jolt made him flinch, but he reminded himself to stay calm. Anik would not help her. Duke ran ahead, scouting the path, occasionally barking softly to warn them of obstacles. Jack marveled at the dog's instincts. Duke seemed to sense every danger before it appeared, and Jack silently thanked him for being their guide. As they moved further from the town, the terrain became harsher. Dry riverbeds cut across the path, and small gullies formed obstacles that Jack had to navigate carefully. At one point, Rusty stumbled on a loose rock, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. He grabbed Emily quickly, steadying her, while Duke barked sharply at the horse to keep it calm. Jack took a deep breath and whispered, "It's okay, Rusty. Take it slow. We're almost through this." The desert stretched endlessly before them, with tall, jagged rocks casting long shadows in the rising sun. The heat was returning, and Jack could feel sweat running down his back despite the early hour. He offered Emily small sips of water from his canteen, and she drank slowly, her lips dry and cracked from the journey. "We're doing well, Emily," Jack said softly. "Just a little farther and we'll be safe." She nodded, her eyelids heavy, but her grip on his hand was firm, a sign that she was still fighting. As the day progressed, Jack noticed dark clouds forming in the distance. The desert wind picked up, carrying dust and small debris across the trail. He felt a knot of worry tighten in his chest. A sandstorm could appear suddenly, and Emily's weakened condition made her especially vulnerable. "We need to find cover," he muttered, scanning the rocky terrain. There was a small canyon not far ahead, and Jack urged Rusty forward carefully, hoping it would provide shelter from the storm. Duke led the way, barking sharply to signal the canyon's entrance. Jack guided Rusty toward it, carefully lowering Emily to the ground once they reached the small natural shelter. He pulled her close and wrapped the blanket around her tightly, shielding her from the blowing sand. Duke sat protectively in front of them, growling at the wind as if to push it away. Jack looked at Emily, whose eyes were wide but trusting. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're safe here for a little while. The storm will pass." The sandstorm raged for over an hour. Jack kept Emily close, holding her hands and talking to her softly, describing the calm they would find once it ended. Duke never moved from his position, ears twitching, eyes alert. Jack realized that the dog's presence was not just comforting to Emily, it was also a source of strength for him. The loyalty and courage of his companion reminded him that they could endure anything together. When the storm finally passed, the desert seemed even more vast and empty than before. The sky was clear, and the sun blazed down fiercely. Jack helped Emily back onto Rusty, offering her sips of water and small bites of soft bread to regain her energy. Duke ran ahead once more, scouting the path, and Jack followed with careful determination. Each step was a challenge, but he refused to give up. Emily's life depended on him, and he would not fail her. As they continued, Jack noticed small signs of wildlife, lizards darting across rocks, birds soaring overhead. But the desert felt eerily quiet in other ways. Every sound seemed magnified, and Jack's senses were on high alert. He could feel the tension in the air, a reminder that even though they had survived the storm, the journey was far from over. Hours passed, and the sun began to sink low in the sky. Jack spotted a distant hill that he recognized from previous travels, a landmark that meant they were getting closer to the familiar paths that led to home. Relief surged through him, but he knew he couldn't let his guard down. Emily was still weak, and any misstep could set them back. He adjusted his hold on her, whispered encouragements, and urged Rusty forward carefully. As they climbed the final hill, Rusty stumbled slightly on loose gravel. Jack caught Emily quickly, steadying her, while Duke barked sharply to alert them to the danger. Jack felt his arms ache from holding her, but he pushed through the pain. "Almost there, Emily," he whispered. "Just a little farther." She looked up at him, a faint smile crossing her lips, and Jack felt a surge of hope. Finally, as the last rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Jack spotted the familiar sight of their home in the distance. Relief and joy flooded him, but he remained careful, guiding Rusty and Emily down the hill slowly to avoid any accidents. Duke ran ahead, barking once to signal that they were approaching safety. Jack followed, his heart pounding with anticipation. When they reached the edge of the property, Jack carefully lifted Emily from Rusty and carried her to a waiting chair on the porch. Duke jumped up beside them, resting his head on Emily's lap. Jack smiled, exhausted but overjoyed. "We made it, Emily," he whispered. "You're home now. You're safe." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered his name softly. Jack held her hand, feeling the warmth of her presence and the strength of her trust. "I'm right here," he said gently. "Nothing will happen to you now." Duke wagged his tail, sensing the relief and joy in the air. For the first time in hours, Jack allowed himself to relax. The journey had been exhausting, dangerous, and filled with uncertainty, but they had made it together. Emily was alive, Duke had been their guide and protector, and the bond between all three of them had grown stronger through the trials they had faced. That night, as Emily rested in the safety of their home, Jack sat on the porch with Duke by his side. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the horizon, but for now, they were safe. The journey had tested them, challenged them, and shown them the power of courage, loyalty, and love. Jack knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had survived together, and that was a bond that could never be broken. He looked down at Duke, who rested his head on Jack's knee and whispered, "You saved her, boy. You saved her." Duke lifted his ears and let out a small, proud bark. Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the dog who had guided them through danger, and for Emily, whose trust and courage had made the impossible journey possible. Jack knew that the days ahead would bring recovery, rest, and the rebuilding of strength, but for now they could simply be together. The desert was behind them, and the warmth of home and love awaited. He leaned back, watching the stars begin to appear in the night sky, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in days. Together they had faced the desert, and together they had survived. And as Jack sat there, holding Emily's hand and stroking Duke's fur, he knew that this journey had shown him something he had always known in his heart, that true courage, true loyalty, and true love were stronger than any storm, any desert, and any obstacle the world could throw in their path. By the time the sun rose high in the sky, Emily was awake and resting in a small bed inside the clinic. Jack had been by her side since the moment they arrived, never leaving her hand for more than a second. He watched her carefully, checking that she drank water slowly, ate small bites, and rested without strain. Duke sat at the foot of her bed, alert and protective, his head occasionally lifting to sniff the air as if ensuring everything in the room was safe. Jack smiled faintly, feeling a sense of relief he hadn't known in days. Emily was alive, safe, and slowly regaining strength. The doctor had come in a few times to check her vitals, nodding with satisfaction each time he left. "She's going to be fine," he told Jack, his voice kind but firm. "She's strong, and she has been lucky to have someone like you to care for her. Keep her rested for the next few hours, and she'll recover even faster." Jack thanked the doctor, feeling gratitude he could hardly put into words. But even as Emily rested, Jack knew their journey was not yet over. They still had to return home safely, and the desert could be unpredictable. By midday, Emily had regained enough energy to sit up fully. She looked at Jack, eyes filled with a mixture of relief, love, and gratitude. "Jack, I don't know how to thank you," she whispered, her voice still weak, but stronger than before. Jack squeezed her hand gently. "No need to thank me. We're in this together. I couldn't let anything happen to you, Emily. Not now, not ever." Duke barked softly as if agreeing, and Emily reached down to stroke the dog's fur, a smile spreading across her face. Jack watched them both, feeling warmth in his chest. He knew Duke had been the true hero of the story, finding her when she was lost, guiding them through danger, and staying loyal no matter what. Without him, Emily might never have survived. When Emily was ready, Jack carefully lifted her back onto Rusty. She leaned into him slightly, trusting him completely, and he held her securely, making sure she was comfortable. Duke ran ahead, alert and vigilant, leading the way as Jack guided Rusty carefully down the trail toward home. The sun was high and strong, and Jack offered Emily small sips of water from his canteen along the way. Each small step was a victory, and Emily responded with quiet courage, determined to move forward even in her weakened state. The journey was long but peaceful compared to the previous days. The desert, while still vast and harsh, seemed calmer now. Birds flew overhead, and the soft rustle of wind through sparse shrubs created a soothing rhythm. Jack kept talking to Emily as they traveled, recounting memories of their life together, stories from their past adventures, and plans for the future. Emily smiled faintly, laughing softly at his stories, and Jack felt a sense of normalcy returning after the chaos of the desert ordeal. As the afternoon sun began to lower, Jack spotted the familiar shape of their home in the distance. Relief washed over him, but he remained cautious, guiding Rusty and Emily carefully along the uneven ground. Duke ran ahead, barking softly, as if to announce their arrival. Jack's chest swelled with hope. After all the trials, they were finally returning to safety, to the place where they could rest fully and recover without fear. When they reached the edge of their property, Jack carefully lifted Emily from Rusty and carried her to the porch. Duke followed closely, resting his head on her lap as if ensuring she would never leave his sight. Jack set her down gently, holding her hand and brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're home now, Emily," he said softly. "You're safe. Nothing will hurt you here." Emily looked around, taking in the familiar sights and sounds of home. Tears filled her eyes, and she whispered Jack's name, overcome with emotion. "Mom!" Jack leaned down and held her hand, feeling her warmth and her trust. "I told you we'd make it," he murmured, "and we did, together." Duke barked once, proud and alert, and Emily laughed softly, a sound that lifted Jack's spirits. He realized in that moment how much the dog meant to both of them. Duke had been more than a pet. He had been a guide, a protector, and a hero. Jack knelt beside Duke, rubbing his ears and speaking softly. "You saved her, boy. You saved her. We owe you everything." Duke wagged his tail as if acknowledging the praise, and rested his head again, content and loyal. Inside the house, Jack helped Emily settle onto a comfortable chair. He brought her water, soft food, and a warm blanket. She leaned back, exhausted but smiling, and Jack sat beside her, holding her hand and stroking Duke's fur. They were finally safe, and for the first time in days, Jack allowed himself to relax fully. Emily spoke softly, recounting her memory of being lost in the desert. "I remember the dust and the heat. I thought I might not make it," she said, her voice trembling. Jack squeezed her hand gently. "You made it. You're safe now, and we're together. That's all that matters." Duke lay at their feet, alert but calm, sensing the peaceful moment. Jack looked at the dog and smiled. "I think he knows how proud we are of him," he said softly. Emily reached down and stroked Duke's fur, her smile widening. "He's amazing," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without him, or you." Jack felt a deep warmth in his chest, knowing that they had survived the impossible together. The rest of the day passed quietly. Jack helped Emily rest, ensuring she drank water and ate small bites of food. Duke never left her side, resting his head gently on her lap or curling up nearby. Jack watched the sunset from the porch, the sky painted with shades of orange and pink, and felt a sense of peace he had not felt in days. They had faced the desert, survived the dangers, and returned home stronger and closer than ever. As night fell, Emily leaned against Jack, exhausted but content. "I feel safe," she whispered. "I feel like I can finally rest." Jack held her close, feeling her warmth and her trust. "You can, Emily. We're home now. Nothing can harm you here." "Not while I'm around, and not while Duke is around either." Duke let out a soft bark in agreement, and Emily laughed quietly, squeezing Jack's hand. Jack looked out at the stars above, thinking about the journey they had endured. The desert had been harsh and unforgiving, but it had also shown him the strength of loyalty, love, and courage. Emily had survived because of her own strength, because of his determination, and because of Duke's unwavering loyalty. Together, they had overcome the impossible. That night, Jack, Emily, and Duke settled into the quiet of home. Emily rested fully for the first time, her breathing even and peaceful. Jack sat beside her, keeping watch, and Duke lay between them, alert and protective. The bond between them had grown stronger through the trials of the desert, and Jack knew that nothing could ever break it. As he drifted off to sleep, Jack whispered softly, "We made it, Emily. We're together and we're safe. That's all that matters." Duke rested his head on Emily's lap one last time, and she smiled in her sleep, comforted by the presence of the two beings who had fought so hard to keep her alive. In the quiet of the night, the house seemed filled with warmth and peace. The desert was far behind them, and the future stretched ahead, full of hope, love, and the promise of new adventures together. Jack knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had faced the hardest test already, and they had survived it together. Jack held Emily's hand gently, watching over her as she slept, and felt a deep sense of gratitude and love. Duke lay quietly, alert but calm, as if understanding the importance of the moment. They had survived the desert, the danger, and the long, exhausting journey, and now they could finally rest, together, as a family. And in that quiet, peaceful night, Jack realized something he had always known in his heart, that true love, courage, and loyalty could overcome anything. With Emily by his side and Duke's unwavering loyalty, he knew that no obstacle, no storm, and no danger could ever break the bond they shared.